I wanted to take a few moments this week and talk to you about something that I feel is very important that occurred to me yesterday. Lori and I have been watching the Art of the Western World video series, the old PBS series, and yesterday we arrived at the birth of the modern. And modern in this context means the turn of the previous century. They were talking about Picasso and Fauvism and all of that sort of thing around the Great War that brought us into the modern world and the modern way of thinking. And also earlier that day, I had written in a blog entry mentioning in passing about the film Mulholland Drive, which led me afterward to go on YouTube and look up the video clip of the dumpster monster. And it took me back to a time in my life where I was consumed with the modern, with the present, and modern in this context, I'm talking about the immediate, that the great and important things are going on right now, the things that speak to our reality, that make sense of things, that are authentic, are urgent, are present. There was in my college a contingent in the music department who felt and behaved as if music had died around the time that Stravinsky was at his height. And then there was this other contingent to which I belonged at the time, although I wasn't in the music department, that almost behaved as if music started around the time that Schoenberg was working. And this latter group felt that the only thing that mattered was right now. And we can draw our answers from this great wealth of information that we have, which indeed we do, about our times, and get the answers that we need about reality and existence and why we're here from exclusively modern sources. So many of us fell away from this mode of thinking with reason. We found it wanting because there were some answers that just were not satisfactory. Sometimes we would think after this that it's because we live in grim, bleak times, but in fact, it turns out that out of this toolbox that we had, we didn't have all of the tools that we needed. I've drawn an example in a chart. This is the bubble of modern times, and it's a bubble like when you are blowing bubbles and one lands on the table and it just kind of goes halfway on the table. And you are told by the modern that everything you need is within this bubble to answer your questions about existence and reality and human life and whatever you need to know. And indeed, there are some really great and helpful things in here. But you need not pierce through that membrane because there's nothing worth your time out there. It is archaic, it is old-fashioned, and it is useless to the modern mindset. However, much like Plato's allegory of the cave, you find that if you do pierce the membrane, and this is our bubble down here because we know in the fullness of time the bubble of the current is actually a very small bubble, but if you pierce through the membrane, you have this vast wealth of resources from which to draw upon. And where the metaphor breaks down is that you can actually go back through the membrane and interact with the things within it, and in fact, possibly have a better knowledge of where the people within the bubble got some of their concepts, the giants, if you will, upon whose shoulders they are standing. And I want to encourage people to do so. There is such a wealth of information, as I mentioned, in this time, that I think could be so helpful for people if they don't buy the hype that the modern bubble is where we need to stay in our thought. There is so much more out there. There is the wealth of existence, and when you stand on this high vantage point that we have in this period in history, there is so much for you to survey and take in. It is a blessing that I think nobody ought to take for granted. Ta-ta.